Hi, I'm Tina Swithin, founder of One Mom's Battle and author of Divorcing a Narcissist. And today I wanted to talk to you about the importance of having really rock solid court orders with no room for manipulation or for the narcissist to twist the court order to his or her advantage. I always say it's kind of like the narcissist has a special pair of goggles that allow them to scan the same court order that I have, the one that's very clear to me, but these special goggles allow them to zoom in on any areas that are gray areas, maybe a little bit open to interpretation, or a special ability to find loopholes that you or I wouldn't even notice because it looks blatantly obvious what the order says. But if there is any room for manipulation, the narcissist will find it. And I, often describe that narcissists are all, they can be very unique. Each individual, they have their own buttons and what they're hiding behind the mask. But when it comes to their ability to find loopholes in court orders, they are all the same. I've actually never met a cluster B or dealt with a cluster B who can't find gray areas to use to their advantage. I remember at the beginning of my battle asking my judge if he would not only clarify a certain part of our court order, but also tighten it up so that there was no room for conflict. And my judge looked right at me and said, "No, I'm not going to micromanage this guy." And by keeping the order vague, he knew that I didn't have a platform to come back into court and hold my ex-husband accountable. And by that time, or by that point in time, our case had already been labeled very high conflict, and he included me in that equation as part of the conflict. So by keeping it vague, it didn't give me an ability to go back into court. And there was another time a few years into our court battle where my daughters almost drowned in a swimming pool. And it was an occasion where my ex-husband, I believe, was hungover or just wasn't paying attention or was napping. Who knows? But both of my daughters almost drowned. And when I went into court to try to hold him accountable for this and put some additional structures in place to protect them, I asked the judge if he would put an order in place that said my daughters had to be in a life vest at all times around water. And the judge basically said to me, I am not going to put orders that detailed in place. He's not going to let anything happen to them, because if in fact something happened to them, he wouldn't be able to live with himself. I felt like screaming in that moment because it was clear to me that my judge did not understand who I was up against. There has always been a part of me who wonders whether or not that near drowning was actually purposeful. I had always feared that my ex would hurt my children just to hurt me. And so that day was a very profound time for me because I truly, I believed 100% that the judge did not know who I was up against. Regardless of if my daughter's near drowning was an accident or if it was planned, my ex-husband would have slept very well at night because he's a sociopath and he lacks a conscience. He was myopic on winning and hurting me. And so however those things unfolded, that was his goal. And therefore that became my reality. And I was up against a system who didn't understand any of that. And had I tried to explain this to the judge or to the court professionals, I would have looked like the crazy one. During my custody battle, it was really difficult for me to set my emotions aside and think strategically. These were my babies, and Mother Nature designed me to protect them, but my hands were being tied by a very broken and uneducated family court system. If I were able to rewind in my case, I would have done things a lot differently, and I would have been much more strategic. I would have sought support, whether it be through counseling, EMDR therapy, meditation, whatever it took. That would have been my absolute goal, was to get to a place where I could center myself and put my emotions in check so that I could think in a more strategic way. Because after spending the past 10 years in the trenches of the family court system, a combination of my own case, but also walking alongside other parents who are fighting to protect their children, I understand more than ever that the cases who are successful are the ones who are able to do that, and to really scrub your situation free of emotions and put on your strategy cap and truly tackle it from that angle. It's really important to educate the family court professionals who are on your team, whether that be a therapist, your attorney, co-parenting counselor, custody evaluator, minors counsel. It's really important to educate those individuals on your need for rock solid, black and white, crystal clear court orders. And I don't recommend running in and self-diagnosing your ex. That's actually, never recommended. It'll backfire. But really explaining to them why you need the court orders to be very clear. In my case, I would have explained that by nature, I'm someone who avoids conflict at all costs, and that I'm up against someone who has never had any respect for my boundaries, and that I've worked very hard over the years to put boundaries in place to protect myself. In fact, he skillfully sought out any loopholes so that he could violate my boundaries, because that's what it's about. It's about control and winning. And so you don't need to diagnose your ex to get those key points across. That and by doing that, what you're essentially doing is kind of giving them a different vantage point to look at things from. You're taking yourself out of the equation, and they're able to look at it through a different lens, that maybe she is not part of the conflict, and maybe this conflict is very one-sided. I think it's very important to keep in mind that most family court professionals have very high egos themselves, and maybe not completely diagnosable as narcissists, but we all have narcissistic traits, some higher than others. And I do find in the family court system that narcissistic traits tend to run pretty high. If you can remove yourself as much as possible from the problems, and these people are skilled at muddying the water, so it's your job to keep filtering the water and keep cleaning it. My truth was, not only did my ex-husband have a disregard for my own boundaries, but he disregarded the court's boundaries, the court's orders, and anybody who was a part of our team. So in my situation, if I were back and able to do this again, my stance would be, Your Honor, He doesn't care what you order. He's going to do what he wants to do anyway. He has no regard for the court's orders. He has no regard for your judgment or your rules, and that is the problem. In my coaching and consulting practice, I see a lot of emails come through that look like they could have been written by my ex-husband. And what I share with my clients is, some of the things that I used to do. So if my ex-husband were to send me an email and ask me to alter the court order or the schedule in any way, my go-to cookie cutter type response was always very consistent. And I would say, I am in receipt of your email and I intend to follow the court order as written by Judge Brown on June 12th, 2017. What that does, if there is a conflict and it does end up back in front of the judge, it doesn't make me look rigid to where if I were just to say, no, I'm not changing the schedule, I'm actually citing the judge's name. And when the judge reads that, he or she thinks, oh, wow, she really puts a lot of value in my orders. And all she's trying to do is follow the orders as I've written them. And so they're less likely to fault me because they get a little bit of an ego boost by reading their name and by seeing that my intention is to honor what they've written. So, it's a small strategy, but in my case, I found that it worked. And it was my truth that I really put a lot of emphasis and value in that court order because it was a protection for me. And so I had no intention of ever operating outside of it. Perfect world, we would have been two healthy people who were able to co-parent and make adjustments, but that was not the case. By citing the judge when you're referencing the court order, what you do is you successfully remove yourself from the equation, and then it becomes somewhat a battle of the egos between the narcissist and the judge, which is where you want things. You want to take a step back and continue to take yourself out of the conflict anytime you can. When I began looping the judge in on my case, that's where I truly began to see things shift. Part of the reason for that, the judge didn't seem to care if my ex-husband lied to me or, wrote things in declarations that were completely fabricated. But when my ex-husband was directly violating the judge or when it became a battle of the wills, the judge seemed to care more. And I didn't care why or what caused him to care more. All I knew was that it was working towards my goal, which was to protect my children. Judges and most family court professionals like to leave orders very blank because, frankly, it's less work for them. And it can take quite a bit of time for them to see the problem as it really is, that you are not part of the conflict equation. And in my case, it took years, but I was successful in protecting my children. So while a lot of it truly wasn't strategy at the time, it was starting to click for me after I had been in this battle for several years, and I was getting better at checking my emotions and keeping myself centered, and I was able to begin to think more logically rather than going by emotion. And that is so important in family court. I really can't emphasize that enough. I hope you are able to incorporate some of the tips that I've shared here today in your own case to protect your children, because that is the goal. And if you are in need of more tips, I encourage you to find my books on Amazon just by typing in Tina Swithin, and also follow One Mom's Battle on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and we have a huge Facebook page, which is open to the public, and we share lots of great tips and advice. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to next week.